What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast, where there's actually consistency for once in recording these, live streaming, which we're live for this one. So hopefully there will be people in the chat, even though I know, again, this isn't necessarily the biggest Mets channel, but we are here. Before we jump into the coverage and everything, leave a like if you do enjoy what you're seeing. Subscribe, turn on your notifications, all that stuff. I am here with Matt, and we are going to talk about the fact that the Mets just absolutely took a giant shit all over the Yankees yesterday, and in the not necessarily the first game, but they still won the first game, and now they roll into the most important series of the entire season, where they're gonna have 4 games against the Atlanta Braves. Must sound familiar, doesn't it, to a couple of years ago, but this time it's for the wild card, not the division, which if the Mets do end up winning the series, sweeping the series, maybe we could have that conversation about the division. But for now, we are focused here on the Atlanta series. But yeah, we're going to talk about everything. And first off, how are we feeling after last night on the confidence scale rolling into the Atlanta series?
Oh, listen, I'm flying right now. It's always nice to beat the Yankees. And not only beat them, but just absolutely kick the shit out of them. I know the first game was a bit close because obviously we had to see Jake Diekman face Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, and somehow he managed to get through that. How he did it, I will never know. But thank you, Jake Diekman, on that one. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if we take this back a couple months ago, to that just horrible May, 22-33, 11 games under 500. If you told me at that time that we'd be here sitting at 53-48, a game and a half back of the Atlanta Braves for second in the division and the first wild card spot, I would have never believed you. But ever since, Grimace, OMG, it's just the vibes have been off the chart. And right now, this Mets team is just they're cruising. They're cruising. And obviously, look, a big series now upcoming against the Braves at Citi Field. We got tonight's game, Sevy's on the mound, and then tomorrow night, the return of our ace, Kodai Senga. So let's see what he's got tomorrow.
Yeah, and it sucks that Christian Scott got hurt at this time, because it would have been so nice to watch this 6-man rotation that we thought they were going to form, but it's looking like Tyler McGill is going to slot into the rotation here, which I don't love it, but you're at a point where you have to make a decision whether it is, because the decision came down to this, and I think this is why the Mets chose McGill. I think it's very simple, but it was either Jose Butto or Tyler McGill. Tyler McGill in AAA has been stretched out to a starting role still, where Jose Butto has not been in a starting role in a bit, and he's also getting high-quality outs. But to counter that, I would say I would be more comfortable with the length that you could get from guys like Jose Butto, and I would want to explore Tyler McGill in the bullpen anyway, but this is the hand we're dealt. And like you said, Senga's coming back, though, which eases the pain a little bit more. And either way, yes, it's not like Scott's been laying the world on fire, which it does suck that he has been struggling a bit. But Met fans writing him off are just absolutely out of their mind. But when it comes to the pitching staff, you got Severino, Senga, and then I'm assuming McGill is going to get Saturday, and then Peterson is lined up. And the Mets seem to win with Peterson on the mound, so maybe that is good there. But Ronaldo Lopez, for the Braves' sake, they seem to win there. I am just so annoyed a little bit that the doubleheader got canceled for them, because now we're stuck facing Chris Sale versus where we wouldn't have had to face him. But yeah, like you said, not just the team winning, the vibes are there. And I'm seeing people talk about this team being more entertained than 2022. I say we pumped the brakes there. Granted, I wasn't necessarily attached to that team, even though they won 101 games. But like you said before, if you told me this team even a couple weeks ago, because the fact that I opened by saying if they beat the Braves and even sweep them here, we could be talking about potentially the division, maybe, which obviously, again, one series at a time, one game at a time, all that stuff. We have to see what happens with the Phillies, of course. But if you told me a couple of weeks ago even that I would be even able to say those words, I would think you're out of your mind, and I would think that I'm just in the middle of a dream, because I didn't think we were going to be here. But they're just getting the contributions. I talked about in my post game yesterday, which that will be like our segue into the discussion of the lineup, because we're kind of going to go with a mixed bag here of talking about, of course, the team's production now and what we could envision for the trade deadline. They kept showing on ESPN the stats in the difference of guys who have an 100 OPS plus on the Yankees, which was a list of Judge, Soto, and I think Stanton might have been on that list, or Volpe. It was like one or two other guys. But it was those guys. And the Mets, it was pretty much their entire lineup, 1 through 9. That's the difference in a team that is top heavy versus a team that has depth. And you have Jeff McNeil, which I think he's the guy that we should be talking about the most right now. Because if we were giving out awards here, second half comeback player of the year trajectory, it's looking like McNeil is going to be an early candidate for that, because I don't know what he did over the All-Star break, but in his last 7 games, he has 4 home runs, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that is more than...
I think he has 5. Oh, no, actually, no, because the 5th one was the Pirates series before the All-Star break, so he had 4.
Yeah, so he's at 4. He has a 391 average, 423 on base, over 1,000 slugging. That's not even talking about OPS. That is slugging alone. He has a 1,500 OPS right now in the last 7 games. Is that going to be what we see from him going forward? I mean, if it is, then forget about it. Just punch this team's ticket potentially to the pennant, because they're getting the contributions then up and down. But if they could even get half of that production going forward, and I said it prior to the second half starting, they just need him to be league average. If he's more than league average, that, 1, eliminates one thing you need at the deadline, and 2, it also is just giving yourself a better chance to win night in and night out and come playoff time.
I think for me, the biggest thing that surprised me with McNeil so far coming out of the All-Star break is he's finding his hitting touch, but in a different way. Because this is not the Jeff McNeil we saw in 2022, where he was just, placing the ball correctly and finding the gaps and just getting on base correctly. No, he's actually hitting for power, which, I mean, when you looked at the second half of 2019, like, we start to see that spark and power from Jeff McNeil, and he was starting to hit a lot of home runs in that second half of the 2019 year. And 2020 was decent, but 2021 he really struggled. And I know, like, a lot of heading into the off season and into the 2022 season, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, we got to trade Jeff McNeil. We have to trade Jeff McNeil. He's not the same type of guy we saw in 2019. And I was always like, nah, I really don't want to trade him, because I'm like, if you looked at his plate approach in 2021, he was always looking for power. And I'm like, that's not your game, Jeff. Your game is just getting on base and putting the ball where the fielders are not. And he obviously switched back to that approach in 2022. He won the batting title that year. And then he had that poor season last year, started off poorly this year, and then the power ball and the home run balls really saved them so far heading into the second half of the year so far. So, I mean, look, it's working for him right now. Hopefully he keeps it up. But I mean, like you said, even if he's just league average, like, that helps that helps the lineup a lot, because right now he's hitting down the lineup. So you're not really needing him for like those big time contributions, but if you could just get those little contributions like we've been seeing from him so far in the second half, and not to mention that he also has a good glove in second base, he can play the outfield, so he is a useful, versatile player if he is hitting.
Yeah, his defense has been better than it's been in previous years, which is helping the case, and probably one of the reasons he was even still on the roster for as long as he was, because I feel like he would have been long gone otherwise, which his OAA and stuff isn't even in that high of a percentile. It was in the 32nd according to Savant, but it feels like his defense has been way better than that. But yeah, you talk about him almost getting that home run yesterday. I thought one of his doubles, I think it was the second double he got, I thought that one was going to leave the yard with the way it looked off the bat. But it's crazy how he simply is like, I'm just going to start hitting the ball hard. I don't care where it is. I'm just going to try to mash it. It's crazy how that little of an adjustment has changed things. And I was saying earlier on, like when we first saw him starting to heat up, I'm like, you know what? All right, now you could trade him. Now he's getting his value back up. Maybe a team will be interested. But if this is what he's going to be going forward, you just simply cannot trade him. And this is what I've been talking about for years with this team. And this is why I talked about in 2022 when people were obsessing and foaming at the mouth over that lineup. I'm like, listen, they're getting contributions, but the previous World Series winners and contenders have proved that you need guys up and down the lineup that are going to hit the ball hard and hit it out of the damn park. Look at the Texas Rangers last year. You had 1 through 9 guys that were crushing home runs left and right. The Philadelphia Phillies, they are a team that lives and dies by the long ball. There are so many examples of teams that are built that way, and that's why when we talk about this offense and the question that arises of if this is sustainable or not, my simple answer is yes, because guys are actually trying to hit the ball hard versus just before where it's Pete Alonso, you hit for power, everybody else just try to get on base and put the weight on Pete's shoulders. And it's kind of ironic now that Pete doesn't have that pressure, that he's having a lesser season, but he did of course have that home run in yesterday's game, which was nice to see. But you talk about what this team needs lineup wise, and that's what I've been dying for. And that's why when it comes to the deadline approach, which we'll get to, if they're going to add a bat, they need someone that fits that type of mold.
Definitely. I think that there obviously is some comparisons to the 2022 team, and I think this lineup is just simply better than the 2022 team. Not only you said because of just the factor that you have a lot of guys who just hit home runs throughout the whole lineup, and obviously, like you said, the Braves, the Rays, the Dodgers, the Rangers of last year, the teams that make deep playoff runs are capable of hitting the long ball throughout the whole lineup. And not only that, but when I look at this lineup compared to the 2022 lineup, another reason why I think this one is better is when you looked at that 2022 lineup and even in 2023 last year, like you noticed it was weird. It seemed like when everybody was hitting, but then there would be stretch games where it's like everyone just cools off at the same time. And it was just so frustrating because like you see it's like, okay, but you guys, you're hitting for this stretch, but then you're just like, it looks like you've never played Major League Baseball throughout this stretch. But this year it's been a little different, especially since the turnaround, like since the bad May and the hot run that this team's been on in June. It seems like, whenever some guys are not contributing, you get contributions from everywhere throughout the lineup. Like for example, right now, Brandon Nimmo has cooled off since it's hot stretch in June and early July. Okay, he's cooled off. Now Jeff McNeil's starting to get hot. Pete Alonso's had a poor season so far. Francisco Lindor's picked up his weight, so that helps too. When it's just not like everyone's like, going. How do I say? Everyone's like on the same page at the same time. It's like, okay, if one guy struggles, I'm gonna pick up your production at this part of the lineup.
Yeah, and a lot of that I think you have to credit Mendoza for, because he made that initial lineup change, which seemed a little ballsy at the time, where you take Nimmo out of the leadoff spot where he's been for years now, you put Lindor there, and Pete Alonso moves down to the cleanup spot, JD Martinez in the 3-hole, and you look at that and you're like, a little bold, but at the same time, he had to try something new, and he caught more than just lightning in a bottle with that. And like you said, though, it's more than just the guys at the top, because guys like Harrison Bader, who I never would have envisioned in a billion years, me being like, I freaking love this guy on the team. Never in a billion years did I think that, but he is contributing more than I thought. You have Tyrone Taylor, who, as of yesterday, prior to the game, I'm like, I wasn't happy when I saw him in the lineup, because I'm like, I don't know, like, why. Well, we soon found out that Bader couldn't play because he was a little banged up, but I was like, this team needs a little bit better than Tyrone Taylor. But then he just has a legacy game, because again, like you said, when a guy's out, somebody's picking someone up, and he wasn't just doing it with the bat. He makes a Harrison Bader-like catch, which had a 5% catch probability in the outfield on Verdugo. And then he did have the home run off Garrett Cole, which this entire team seems to just own him. You see him get huge hits time and time again. And I said this in my post game yesterday. You're in a spot right now where it's like you have so many options of what you could do because you have two guys on your bench that you're not even utilizing, and you still have this much production coming from guys like Bader, from guys like Taylor, from guys obviously at the top of the lineup. And you have so much flexibility where you get rid of Stewart and Gamble and you make this bench even deeper. All of a sudden, I mean, who is stopping this lineup if you get another bat? The guy that I want, and I've mentioned in our group chat, obviously, is Randy Arozarena. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Realistically, I think they're shopping in the Jesse Winker market. I think they're shopping in the Brandon Lau market. I think they're in that sort of range, which I think is not a bad idea. I think if you get Brandon Lau and then you have Jeff McNeil splitting time there at second base, playing a bit of the outfield, and then you have Bader and Taylor splitting time in center field, because I, for one, cannot count on starting Marte. And if he does come back, fine. He could be taking over that DJ Stewart type role. But I can't count on that. And I think getting a guy like Brandon Lau would be a good fit. Maybe a Jonathan India, if they're interested. I don't know which route you go. But all I know is that, like you said, you're getting just unreal production. It was shown on full display last night when this lineup is firing on all cylinders. And if they're not, you don't need them to. Like, JD Martinez, for the past month, outside of the last few games or so, outside of like the last two, he's done virtually nothing really. Like, he has no home runs in his last 15 games. So you don't even need him producing that much. You aren't relying on Pete Alonso, like we mentioned. And once those guys get going, like we saw with Pete last night, like we saw with JD Martinez last night, and then Nimmo's bound to break out of the slump, who the hell knows? And who the hell is stopping this?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, like you mentioned, JD has been struggling, but he had that nice game yesterday, so hopefully he breaks out of that. Pete obviously had that big home run off Garrett Cole, so hopefully he starts to find some form in terms of power. But yeah, I mean, going back to the trade additions, like you mentioned, like, yeah, look, so listen, it would be nice to pull off a trade with trade with the Rays to acquire a guy like Randy Arozarena, obviously because big power bat, especially a proven playoff performer as well. Obviously, he had that big 2020 postseason run when the Rays went to the World Series and lost to the Dodgers in 6. But yeah, I mean, maybe the Mets don't have to go out and get that big time power bat, but maybe they could just add a couple nice additions, like depth additions to the lineup. Kind of similar to what the 2021 Atlanta Braves did. Obviously they lost Ronald Acuna that year, out for the year, and with a couple of nice small additions, they were able to salvage that year. Obviously, they weren't like a great team in the regular season. They only won 88 games. They won the division that year, and I mean, you looked at their additions that they made that year. Jock Peterson contributed in the postseason and down the stretch. Jorge Soler, obviously with that big home run in Game 6 of the World Series. Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall. So you don't need that big time that big time bat, but add a couple nice little depth pieces to the lineup, couple bench options. Then I'm sure we'll get into it in terms of potential bullpen arms the Mets could add, and maybe even a starter or two, which maybe you turn around and you flip Jose Quintana for somebody else. We'll see. Right now, obviously, like we mentioned before, you got to take care of business against the Braves, and then you head into that Twins series, which the trade deadline happens during that Twins series. But yeah, right now I have my full trust in David Stern. So let's see what he has, what he's working on right now in terms of trades.
And before we continue with the deadline talk, I think that we would be just terrible Met fans if we didn't talk about the fact that you don't need to acquire big time star right now, because you have Francisco Lindor just absolutely playing at an MVP level. Remember when most Met fans, not all, but most Met fans, including myself, I'm not going to hide from where I was just absolutely ripping on the guy and getting annoyed. And I never went to the lengths, I at least don't think I did go to the lengths where I said you need to cut bait with them, because it was unrealistic. It was always unrealistic. So we all needed to rally behind him. He gets a standing O, and the rest has been just history. Tell me if this is good company, because this was what James Shiano of the mets'd podcast tweeted last night. Francisco Lindor and Shohei Ohtani are the only two players with 20 home runs, 20 doubles, and 20 stolen bases. That's a good player, I think, right? Like, Shohei Ohtani's a pretty good player, I would say. You could correct me if I'm wrong on that, though, of course.
I mean, he's all right. It's nothing special.
Yeah, like, I don't know. The guy is like a perennial MVP candidate, I think. So not too bad. Then I want to fast forward, which I should have had these stats on deck for Lindor's numbers since he moved into the leadoff spot. He's 7th in WRC plus, and he's 2nd in the NL behind Bryce Harper, which here are the guys that he's surrounded with in WRC plus since he moved to the leadoff spot. You have Aaron Judge and Juan Soto leading the way. Yordan Alvarez, Bobby Witt, Bryce Harper, like I mentioned, Gunnar Henderson, Francisco Lindor, Corey Seager's in that range. You have Carlos Correa, Shohei Ohtani, Vlad, Devers. I think these guys are good baseball players. Again, I could be wrong, but I think they're pretty good baseball players. You look at WAR. Since he moved into the leadoff spot, he is 4th in the MLB in WAR, right behind Juan Soto. I think that's a pretty good player right there. We're talking about a guy that, if he did not struggle out of the gate, would be the slam dunk favorite to win NL MVP. And even with those struggles, there is a very good chance that he could win it if he continues this. And right now, I feel like there's no reason to believe he won't, because he looks more comfortable than we've ever seen him when he comes up to the plate as a New York Met. Like, the first year, you could tell he felt the pressure. He had a giant weight on his shoulder to produce and get things done. You had the whole thumbs down thing as well. Year 2, a bit better. I should say more than a bit better. Like, he was a lot better year 2, but it's still like, all right, maybe you could get a bit more. Last year, very solid year, especially down the stretch. And then this year, I mean, this is the best we've seen. And again, he just looks comfortable at the plate right now, which is the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's the one thing you mentioned, comfortability. Like, it seems like he doesn't have that pressure anymore of, having to drive in those, those big runs early in the game. He could be the nice table setter. And even another thing, it's like why he's been a better option than Nimmo leading off is Lindor, when he actually gets on base, he actually steals.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a run threat.
Right now, he's a 20-20 guy. He'll probably reach 30-30 this year. And even we saw last night, I mean, it was already, the game was already out of reach, but he came up with guys on base, and he hit that second home run of the game to make it, I think, 11-1 at that point. The guy's he's simply been a man possessed. And obviously then on top of that, you have his Gold Glove defense every year, which the guy's just an incredible infielder. I mean, some of the plays the guy makes, it's like, Jesus Christ. And then he's got the good arm, and then he's just overall a good clubhouse guy. He's obviously one of those. He's probably right now one of the co-captains along with Brandon Nimmo. We saw the stories, of him, him and Nimmo paying for the team's dinners and stuff. So yeah, like we mentioned before, and that just fits right into the good vibes all around in the clubhouse right now. So I mean, if he keeps it up right now, then yeah, he could surely be a candidate for the NL MVP. It sucks that he got off that such a slow start, because even if he was just average at that point, like, because he was hitting like his average was just bad.
He was below 200 at one point for a bit.
So like even if to start the year he gave you like a 240 average and like a 710 OPS. Like, if he gave you that at the start of the year and then you added on the production he's given you over the last couple months, he probably would have been a clear favorite for the NL MVP right now.
I need to do the math at some point on this to see his numbers since he started leading off. If he did if he put up these numbers over the course of a full 162, what it would have been. So we could really have that conversation. But I'd imagine he'd be sitting right now in like the 850, maybe even 900 OPS territory, which would be absolutely absurd and worth more than what he's getting paid then at that point. So that conversation could be put to bed about him being overpaid, which, by the way, Michael, what's going on? Sorry, I just didn't realize before. But yeah, and I want to go back to the point you brought up about the leadership, and I absolutely love, because we talked about time and time again. I think this was the biggest issue with the 2022 team. It seemed like there was a lack of leadership and accountability with that team, because Buck Showalter was just all nonchalant in the clubhouse, which was very apparent, especially last year, where Mendoza, it seems like, is rallying these guys. You have Lindor, who had the team meeting, which it feels like over the course of time, which, again, forget just the comfortability of being a Met. It seems like he's more comfortable in the clubhouse, taking over the role of being the leader and being the type of guy. You have JD Martinez, who has been there, done that, which you have his leadership. And there was something that I forgot who put the article together. It was a couple months ago, but I love that Brandon Nimmo too has talked about how he wants to get better at being a leader, and he wants to start, he's still trying to figure it out and learning how to approach guys the right way, but he wants to be that type of guy and, put together that type of role. That's something that you need on a championship team, a guy that is going to hold you accountable, and a guy that is going to, put you, I'm trying to think of the wording I want to say, but a guy that's not going to bat an eye and just, shy away from picking you up when you're down if you're struggling or something, and you need to be held accountable. A guy's going to hold you accountable. They have needed that type of deal for quite a while now. And I also think a lot of that goes in hand with David Stearns being cutthroat, because the amount of roster turmoil we've seen this season, I can't remember the last time the Mets just even like tweaking the minor league system has happened so much over the course of a season. Like, you are seeing guys move up and down the system. You are seeing them trade guys at will. You're seeing them cut guys at will. You're seeing so much roster movement throughout the course of the season. And I know a lot of that does have to do with the fact that the Mets' entire bullpen, pretty much, that they had opening day, whether it's Tonkin, Lopez, Raley, you've lost a lot of those guys, but you're still seeing so much turnover with the roster from the highest level to the lowest level. And I think Stearns having that no bullshit mentality is spreading through the organization as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I remember before the season started, I think David Stearns, he was having a press conference or an interview, something like that, and he was basically saying, it's like, listen, the bullpen you started with at the start of the season, it's not going to be the bullpen that you finish the year with. There's a lot of interchanging parts, and for a time period, guys will be good here, then they'll drop off, then you find another guy. I mean, prime example, we had Reed Garrett at the start of the year, and he was just lights out with the splitter. Nobody could touch it. And you looked at his baseball savant chart, and that thing was just all fucking red. It looked like a fucking Darth Vader's lightsaber. And then obviously, he got that arm injury. I still don't think like he's cooked in totally. I think it was just his arm. I think once he comes back, maybe he won't be the dominant guy we saw at the start of the year, but he'll be at least a productive bullpen piece that we have. But then we saw him go down, and then we saw the emergence of Dednell Nunez, who he's been really good out of the bullpen so far. And then I think going back to what you were saying before about Brandon Nimmo and about how he wants to be a leader and he wants to increase his leadership attributes. I think the thing that really started to win me over with Nimmo was that he basically, when during one of the Mets homestands after a win, he was being interviewed by Steve Gelbs on the field, and he basically flat out came out to David Stearns and Steve Cohen. He said, "Listen, we want to be buyers at the deadline." So that's I mean, as the leader, that's what you want to see. You want to see, like, listen, I personally believe in the group of guys we have in this clubhouse. Buy for us, because we know that we think we can do something special this year, and you love to see that from him.
And I think Steve Cohen's backing that with the way that he's been tweeting over the past few days, and which I guess could segue us into the deadline conversation. And I think that we know the priority. It's acquire arms, and a couple more arms because this team desperately needs that. They do have Fujinami that it's looking like his IL stint or his rehab stint is coming to a close, so they're going to have to make a decision there. You have Sean Reed Foley, who I don't know if he started a rehab assignment or if it's just bullpens with him, but you do have Sean Reed Foley, who is going to start returning. I'm not sure the status on Reed Garrett either, but you have a couple of arms already that are going to come through, and why not add to it? Why not go out and get more arms? And we'll talk about a couple of relievers. I know I made that video of a couple weeks ago of relievers I'd like to see them acquire. Obviously, some realistic, some unrealistic there. But I think this goes back to what you just brought up with Stearns, where he was saying the bullpen's not going to be the same through the whole year. That's why I don't want to see them overpay for a Tanner Scott. I don't want to see them move mountains for a David Robertson reunion. As much as it would be nice to have guys like that in the bullpen, you don't have to move mountains to make this bullpen work, because we've seen Stearns get just guys like Danny Young and Alex Young, and they've gotten just quality outs. Just quality outs. You have guys like Phil Maton, who we picked up, getting outs. You just need guys that are going to be able to get outs, and that's where it gets to the conversation where you have guys that don't get outs. You have Adam Ottavino, which does lead me to a question before we continue this discussion. So since Senga's coming back, a guy's going to have to be off the roster, and then, of course, McGill coming back. Who do you think are the two that get removed from the roster?
I would have to imagine Ottavino is one.
Is he, though?
I hope it is. And then, I mean, they've got they have three lefties right now in the bullpen, because they have Danny Young, they have Alex Young, who actually has been a solid pickup so far for the Mets. He's been decent. And then you have Jake Diekman. I'd imagine it'd be one of those three that might get. I hope it's Diekman. I hope it probably won't be, but I would imagine one of those three get cut.
Yeah, despite Diekman having that save, I'm really hoping that, like you mentioned, it's going to be. I'm really hoping that's going to be him, because you can't trust him still. And again, as cool as it was for him to get that save against the Yankees, you have to also realize, and I think Stearns knows deep down, that it's just not going to be sustainable what he did going forward. But regardless, yeah, I think personally, though, I think it's going to be, I mean, I'm hoping Hauser maybe gets cut, but realistically, I think Ottavino, like you mentioned, I think is the guy, and I think Danny Young is just going to get sent down, just because I think he has options still. So that's kind of just like a decision where it's like, yeah, sure, but we'll see what it ends up being. But we'll segue into the bullpen, where, again, just my thing is get arms, because look at, like I mentioned before, I don't want to overpay for guys, because you look at what the Marlins gave up, for example, when they traded for David Robertson last year, and that didn't exactly work out for the Marlins. He had like a 8 ERA and was letting up runs left and right, blowing saves left and right for them. I don't want to overpay when you have a very good pitching lab too, nonetheless. Are there any guys you have on your radar that you would want them to get?
Probably because I mean, just looking right now at the teams that are probably going to sell, my one unrealistic guy that I would like just to partner him, because it would be brother and brother in the bullpen, would be an Alexis Diaz from the Cincinnati Reds, because it probably looks like they would sell, but I probably would think the price of them is going to be a bit too high. So that's probably going to be, like I said, my more unrealistic one. I mean, I was looking around like the Cubs, maybe like Hector Neris. I looked at him, but when you looked at his baseball savant thing, like his walks are so high, and I mean, he probably would fit right in, because the Mets rotation and bullpen loves to walk guys. So, and then probably maybe if you could swing a deal with like the Pirates or something. I know they're 52-50, so they're totally not out of it. But I don't know. Maybe if you could somehow fleece them into giving us back Colin Holderman, it's probably gonna be unlikely. But yeah, I don't know. I know there was a couple guys from the Tigers that I was also interested in. I don't know. Listen, I'm not no pitching connoisseur or something. That's David Stern's thing. So I don't know. Let's see the man, the myth, the legend.
We
Let's see
know
what he
who.
cooks. Let's see what he cooks up.
I mean, yeah, I trust him either way. To get quality arms, but I do want to bring up the Reds because I do think they have a couple of decent options, which I will get into some of my favorites. I obviously highlighted a guy like Justin Wilson when I did my video. His numbers have since dipped a bit, but again, I still wouldn't be worried because he's a guy that's pitching in a very hitter-friendly park, so I wouldn't be entirely worried. I also would like to highlight, who I didn't talk about, Nick Martinez is a guy that is kind of getting on my radar a bit because I think that he's another guy who's just struggling because of the ballpark he pitches in. But if you look at some of the underlying numbers, I mean, there's a lot to like about him. He has a 3.13 FIP, so that's his ERA is way higher than his FIP. His ERA is at 3.88. He's a guy that really doesn't allow a lot of hard contact. Also, weirdly, doesn't get ground balls. So, which again, the issue is there though. Of course, he doesn't strike a lot of guys out. So it seems like he's just getting soft contact outs there. But he doesn't walk a lot of batters, which is my biggest thing with a guy like Nick Martinez. The guy controls the zone very well. You look at his Savant page, he's in the 98th percentile in walk percentage. You bring a guy like that in, a guy that gets batters to chase as well, I think that could be an intriguing option because they do need to get something different in this bullpen. And that was my biggest thing when I made the video. They need to get somebody, in my opinion, that isn't going to be walking the park. They need to get somebody that's going to come in and be able to be like Nunez, a fireman, where guys are on base and you don't have to worry about him walking guys in and doing all that other stuff. So I think he would be an intriguing option personally. Outside of Justin Wilson on that team, if you look at other options, there's Lucas Sims, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but it's an option there. And outside of that, I don't know if Diaz is realistic, but he's there as well.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Martinez's baseball savant card, yeah, like you said, doesn't walk a lot of guys in that 90th percentile. Does get guys to chase, but I mean, you look at the pitching breakdown. Has his changeup looks good. His expecting batting average of 169. Let's see, four seamer 234 expecting batting average. So obviously it's more the cutter and sinker that's been the cutter, sinker, and the curveball that's been more hit hard. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the overall baseline, yeah, it would be an interesting guy to pick up.
That surprises me that his cutter, because I didn't even look at those numbers. That surprised me that his cutter gets hit bad because his cutter sits around 89 and his four seam, which I thought would be the pitch that gets hit the most, is sitting at 93 because he doesn't throw that hard. So I was like, I feel like that's the pitch he gets beat up on. So that's a bit of a surprise to me. But
yeah, I mean, the actual batting average for his cutter is 345.
yeesh, and he's using that cutter quite a bit as well. Yeah, that's it's ideal. I mean, you look at a guy that he's compared to, Michael Walker this year has been actually pretty solid. Yeah, and he relies a lot on the changeup, it looks like, as well, which is interesting. But yeah, either way, again, like, I don't hate the idea because you get a guy that is good in terms of not allowing a lot of walks, which I think would be really welcoming for a bullpen that does have issues with that. In terms of other bad teams, I mean, it really gets thin. Like, that's the thing that sucks. This reliever market is really not, like, after the top guys, there's really a lot of teams that just that are selling that don't really have exciting stuff, like the Rockies. Nothing really excites me there. The Nationals, I don't feel like doing business within the division, especially with Rizzo. You have the Marlins, who I do think AJ Puck could be a little intriguing. If
Yeah, he's actually had a really good year this year so far.
Yeah, which who would have thought that he was not going to work in the rotation? But they tried him, and obviously that inflated his numbers quite a bit to where they are. But outside that, I mean, you bring in a guy like AJ Puck, I think that would be very welcoming because he's a guy that actually throws pretty hard from the left side. His fastball sits at around 95, sinker at about 95. Does have a lot of pitches that he could utilize in general. So I do think AJ Puck would be very nice to add. The problem is he's another guy though that does walk quite a bit of batters, but it's just again, you got to find some of these guys that aren't going to cost much because if you start to look at guys like Scott, Mason Miller, which Mason Miller, I will say right now, is the only guy, the only reliever I'd be willing to overpay a bit. But outside of that, you got to explore this type of market because I don't want the Mets to do, I don't want them to, I want them to get the Holderman Vogelback type deal in their favor. I want them to do that sort of business where they just find a guy and give up peanuts to get said guy. So, like we said before, we trust Stearns with that. But we'll segue into more deadline talk here. And that leads to the question of, do you think they should add a starter? To me, I have my answer, which I know might not be a popular answer, but I have my answer.
I would say I would like them to add a starter, and my reasoning is, if this team does make the playoffs, right? I think if because I trust Starks to fix the bullpen, right? And obviously, the lineup's been hitting, so I'm cool with the lineup right now. I think the one detriment that could really hurt this Mets team in the playoffs is the starting pitching. And the reason why I say that is because you have Kodai Senga coming back on Friday. We don't exactly know how he'll pitch coming off of the IL. Obviously, he got beat up in his last rehab start, but I'm not really too concerned about that. That stuff happens from time to time. It happens to the best pitchers, so I'm not worried about that. Sevy, I'm confident in him right now, even though sometimes we do see him, he can have an off start, but I'm not too concerned about him. But because really, when you go into the playoffs, you really need 4 decent starters. So Senga, I'm confident in. Sevy, I'm confident in. Obviously, Scott's hurt right now. We don't know, like, with the we've heard that the injury's not too bad, that he's resting right now, but I'm not putting my full faith in him yet, just because with the injury side. But then when you really look at it, like Manaya, okay, solid, but do I trust him in the playoffs? I'm not sure. Quintana, not really. And the big reason why I say that is because those two guys don't give you a lot of length. We see a lot from their starts, 5 innings, 6 innings sometimes. And when you're going into a playoff rotation, and when you're looking at really 4 guys, you need those guys to give you length. And especially with a guy like Senga, who, like I said, he's coming back, and probably the Mets are, not probably, they will. They're going to go to a 6-man rotation. So Senga, once again, like we saw last year, he's going to be pitching every 6th day instead of every 5th day. Now, when the playoffs rolls around and he has to pitch, how is he going to be on regular rest? Like, we haven't seen him pitch consistent on regular rest, so that does scare me a little bit. But yeah, the reason, like I said, why I want them to add another starter is because I need another guy who's going to give them more length, anywhere from 6 to 7 innings consistently.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I thought it was going to be unpopular to say it. I think it's slam dunk if they need to, and I honestly would go as far to say I would prioritize getting a good starting pitcher more than throwing the kitchen sink for the bullpen. And I know the bullpen has struggled, but Christian Scott, either way, he should be on an innings limit. I would like it for the Mets to be able to move him to the bullpen when he comes back and is healthy. I think he would thrive there, and I think he could give it his all back there instead and you're going to see him be a big time arm for the Mets going forward. And like you said, I mean, we watched Sean Manaea yesterday. The guy made us sweat our asses off for the first few innings until the Mets like blew the game open. Jose Quintana really doesn't give you length. You have the questions of Senga. Sevy's like the only guy that could really give you 7 innings right now in this rotation. And you don't want, especially if you're a wild card team, you don't want to have to burn your bullpen so much in a wild card series. And that's why I'm looking at 2 guys that really stand out to me the most for the Mets for the rotation. It's either the guy that I was clamoring for in the offseason in Eric Fedde, or it's Zach Eflin. And those guys, I won't lie, they don't eat the most innings either. Fedde more so could give you more consistently go 6-7 innings. Eflin a little more up and down, but that's also because the season for him has been up and down. He's either lights out when he starts or he's letting up like 5 runs. So that's a bit of a scare, if you want to say, with Eflin, but maybe on a better team, things change with that. To me, I'd prefer Fedde because of the guaranteed innings you get more and because he's just been lights out. And considering the White Sox, even considering he's good on the White Sox, I feel like it should be a slam dunk that he'd be better here. But you talk about adding Fedde into the fold. All of a sudden, you have a guy that could give you 6-7 innings every 5th day. That's going to help your bullpen be better because they're not getting taxed. And your bullpen gets better by moving guys from the rotation to the pen. And you talk about adding Fedde to the fold. Then your wild card rotation, you could have Senga, Severino, Fedde as your 3 guys in a wild card matchup. I like that way more than putting pressure on Christian Scott to go out there, or by putting Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, or David Peterson out there. To me, I think the chips should be in. If you're throwing the chips in to get Fedde, and maybe you get a reliever there. Maybe you get like Brebbia or someone like that paired with them. Who knows? But I think you add a guy like that, and that all of a sudden changes the conversation further with this team.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna go like Fetty's the guy I would be interested in. Obviously, it sucked that they couldn't get him in the offseason, but I mean, if you're looking at maybe like not only adding Fetty in that deal, but like we mentioned, needing outfield depth, especially with we don't know right now like what Marte is gonna give us when he comes back, and right now we have DJ Stewart, Ben Gamel, and Tyrone Taylor as outfield depth. And I know Tyrone Taylor, like we said, had that big game yesterday, but are we really going to, rely on him to give us consistent, games off the bench? Probably not. But I mean, if you want to if they could swing a deal like to get Eric Fedde and bring back Tommy Pham in that deal as outfield depth, because Tommy Pham's actually had a solid season so far. I think he's batting .268 this year. So I wouldn't mind that. I know obviously he criticized the locker room last year, but I don't think that was really that was I see. But the thing with me is like I don't think that's like because I don't think that was out of hate or something. I think that's just more out of that he has more faith in those guys, and he was just trying to say like those guys actually have talent in that locker room. If they actually put it together, they could actually be a really solid team because like I know like he was talking about that. Was it during the World Series or before the World Series? But he was saying like that roster put together was probably had more individual talent than that Arizona Diamondbacks team that made it to the World Series last year. So obviously he sees that there's talent in that clubhouse. So if they could just put it together like they are doing it right now, yeah, like I said, I think Tommy Pham would be a guy that I would like to bring back.
I wouldn't be opposed, but I'm also not hanging out. Like, I'm not clamoring for it because I'd be lying if I said I didn't have worries about him coming in and potentially ruining the vibes and there still being a void with maybe certain guys being rubbed the wrong way by what he said last year. But again, I also wouldn't be opposed if it is a package deal, but to me, which I guess that could segue us into the final discussion here of the deadline stuff, is what they do for a bat. And you do have guys like Tommy Pham, which I, again, I have mixed feelings about, but the guy that I think every Met fan is talking about is Jesse Winker, and I have mixed feelings still about Winker because I just worry still about him coming in here, and because let's be honest here, we haven't seen him do what he's doing right now in quite a bit, and I do worry about the bat speed being slow at some point leading to regression. And I know he's actually hitting somewhat decent for power in a limited sample size with 11 home runs, but I just have my worries of bringing him in. I really do. Especially considering some of the comparables in terms of Savant is guys like Aaron Hicks, Buster Posey on the back nine, Josh Bell in a down year, Clint Frazier, and Lorenzo Cain on the back nine.
Yeah, it's not great.
I don't... And it's another guy where it's just... I don't want to hurt the defense of this team right now. Because this team right now has been so good defensively. This is one of the better defensive Met teams we've seen in a while. I worry about him running out there in the outfield. And especially when you have guys that are just better athletes. And I don't know. I think that there's got to be a way you could find a better bat. And I know the question's going to be then, who is that guy? I have no clue. But I just worry about a guy like Winker. I really do.
Yeah, I know you mentioned before, like we were talking in the group chat. I know you mentioned, a possible reunion of bringing back Conforto, which I wouldn't be totally against, but I don't know. I mean, he's been all right this year for the Giants. I know it's over there in Oracle Park. It's not really a hitter's friendly ballpark, but I mean, he has experience.
Jekyll and Hyde with him.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he's going to be a fourth outfield bat, that is a solid bat as a bench piece. Like I won't lie, and he does play a decent. He is decent defensively, so it's not like he's going to be a liability out there either.
Yeah, I mean, I would, as crazy as it sounds, I'd prefer him. I would also, I think the guy that I want still is Brandon Lau. For the lineup, I think that McNeil could just play the outfield. I don't know what other positions Lau could play because there's no way he could only play second base. I feel like that's a guy that can move around a bit. But I just look at some of the things like the bat speed is a lot better. He hits the ball harder than Jesse Winker. Does strike out a bit more, but he still draws a good amount of walks. So it's not like he's completely chasing everything. Obviously, again, there's worries with the defense, but to me, I prefer bringing in a guy that I know I feel like his bat's more sustainable. Plus, I feel more comfortable with bringing in a guy that has been through the grind of the postseason more versus Jesse Winker. But maybe that's just me. But I don't know if you have anything to add on the Brandon Lau front.
No, not really. I mean, I do like him. I haven't seen a lot of him recently because I'm not really in tune with Tampa Bay Rays games. But he'd be a solid ad. Good bat, proven playoff player. So yeah, if Stearns could find a way to bring him in and not get fleeced at the same time, because we know the Rays love to fleece other teams. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, because like I'm trying to even find other options. You are just so thin on options outside of that. Honestly, like you're talking about then going into that tier where you're gonna have to overpay for guys like Randy, like Jazz, like Robert, which I would love Randy. I think Randy would be such a good ad. Which I do wonder, which does lead me to getting to one of the comments, which asks, do I think we'll see Beatty again? I wonder if they find a deal like if Randy is on the table and the Rays want a guy like Brett Beatty, I mean, you have to add in more, obviously, but you have to do that deal. Like, I'm done holding out hope on Brett Beatty.
Yeah.
Congratulations to him doing great in AAA. And listen, I think he would thrive in Tampa Bay because it's the Rays. And that's the type of player that would fit perfect in that organization. He could go thrive there. But I just don't see it working here anymore. And I think I think there's 3 prospects I look at that, if you even want to count Beatty as a prospect, but you have Brett Beatty and 2 other prospects then that I look at and say, if you could find a way to dangle them as trade bait and make teams believe that these guys are good and you could get like a superstar player in return, you do it all day of the week, twice on Sunday. I look at Brett Beatty. I look at Luis Acuna because people are going to look at the name on the back of the jersey and think that guy's good. And then Kevin Parada, who I don't have faith in really either, which I know he's doing a lot better in AA as of lately, but if you could sell high on any of those guys while they're lighting it up in the minor leagues, do it. Do it. Like, this team right now has proven that they're worth going in for a bit. I'm doing it. And Randy wouldn't be here just for this year. He would be here for the long haul. And I know people are going to look at his numbers and say, I don't want a guy that has struggled this year. And to that I say, well, you're not really paying attention to what's been going on then. I'm sorry, you just aren't. Because if you look at the splits, I'm going to read to you, guys, his numbers as of lately. You look at his second half numbers, granted, being a smaller sample size, he's hitting 381, has a 480 on base, 952 slugging, 1400 OPS, with a 292 WRC plus, which I don't know if anyone heard what I was talking about before, but that's a higher WRC plus than when I talked about Lindor's WRC plus since moving to the leadoff spot. That's higher than anyone else in baseball. So you're bringing in a guy that has been on fire, and if you look at the numbers, he thrives most in the cleanup spot. You would have to get creative with the lineup at that point because Pete's been in that cleanup spot, and I don't know how much you want to touch it. To me, I look at it as JD Martinez was doing better when he was here in the 5-hole. What if you move Pete up to the 3-hole, you put Randy in the cleanup spot, and then JD Martinez goes back to hitting 5th?
Sounds good.
It sounds good on paper, but will it happen? Probably not. Again, I'm being ambitious. I'm trying to hold out any bit of hope that it would happen, even though I know that it's unrealistic. I'm trying to manifest it somehow. But I think if you could find a way to trick them into thinking Brett Beatty's better than he is, you move Parada in that deal, and they're probably going to want someone higher, like a little highly regarded in the prospect pool, which I don't know who it is that you'd have to give up, but I'm sorry, if it's Brett Beatty, Parada, or Acuna, and like a pitching prospect, I'm doing it. I'm doing it because the pitching lab here has got better to where if you give up pitching prospects, if the Rays want a lot of pitching prospects, then throw the kitchen sink. I trust this team enough to have a factory of pitchers cycling through to where it won't hurt them in the long run. So I would do it if it's possible, but if they do want a guy like Sprout,
yeah,
that's where I'm a little hesitant.
Yeah.
But here's a question I'll throw at you. If they want Christian Scott, if it's Scott, Beatty, and a lower level prospect instead of Acuna or Parada, are you doing that?
With the uncertainty of his arm, I might. There is a discussion to be had there. There definitely is. I mean, I love Christian Scott. I think he could potentially turn into a not maybe an elite tier ace, but like a lower level ace. I think he could definitely hit that potential, and especially you give him to the Rays. I'm sure he probably will find a way to hit that elite potential. He'll probably just go out there and have like a 2.2 ERA throughout for the rest of his career. But it's I don't know. I don't know. It's there definitely is a conversation to be had there though, of if you do that deal.
And it's a tough conversation. I know. Scott throws strikes. I know. But like you were saying with Tampa wanting Sproat, you have to give the guy. I don't think they could ask for the caliber of Sproat. For a guy like Randy right now, I know they have control on him for a bit, but I think Sproat would be. I don't think that's his type of value unless Sproat is going with like very low end prospects on top of that. But and yeah, he needs to learn how to get lefties out. But I think that if that deal's an option, I'm so tempted because you make this lineup so much better. Oh, could you imagine this lineup just the top five alone with Randy hitting cleanup? I'd absolutely love it. I'd absolutely love it. Again, I think we're being ambitious here. I don't think they're shopping in that market, but there's a conversation to be had.
We would definitely be LeBron if Randy showed up and started batting in the cleanup position.
And I know that there's the conversation. I don't want to pull that comment up because of what you included in that, but with McNeil at right field, he could play second base. I know Iglesias has been hitting well, but that's the luxury you have of a quality bat off the bench still.
But then, yeah, just because I didn't get to answer that. But yeah, going back to that Beatty point, no, I don't think we see him ever again. I mean, unless there's some major injury bug, then no, I don't think we see him. I think Beatty, while he's still young, he's just showed us what he is so far. He's a quadruple A player. He can't hit at the major league level, but he absolutely just crushes triple A pitching. And look, it sucks because especially since I bought the guy's jersey, so looks like I'm not getting my return on my investment right there. Should have invested in a Vientos jersey, but you know we all make the wrong decisions from time to time.
Hey, I got a Tyler McGill jersey. It's all good. we
No, yeah, and then also what that's like, Beatty's pretty much he's log jammed because Vientos right now is taking a spot at third base, and I know the big criticism with Vientos was he's not great defensively, but I mean to be honest, he's been decent defensively at third base. I mean he made that nice defensive pick in yesterday's game against the Yankees, and he's not no platinum glove winner like Nolan Arenado or Matt Chapman, but he's been reliable at third base so far. And probably, depending on what happens with Pete in the offseason, I could easily see Mark Vientos switching over to first next year if the Mets decide not to bring back Pete, which probably depending because I don't think he's a David Stearns guy personally. So I could see a world where Pete Alonso is not back next year. So Vientos would obviously fit right there. But then also you look at the other logjams. I mean, you have a guy in Ronnie Mauricio, which if Ronnie Mauricio was in the lineup this year, and just adding all those bombs up to this lineup, I mean, that would be special.
Wish.
But he's going to be back next year. Obviously, you have Acuna, whether or not he shapes out.
And if McNeil continues to heat up, where's McNeil's going to take second base now? Like Beatty was getting reps there.
And also, I know he's probably not a third baseman. He probably won't play there unless he just starts playing there. But you also have Jet Williams, which, like I said, I don't think he plays third base because he's more of a shortstop center field guy. So, but yeah, there is a logjam right now in terms of just infield prospects overall. So yeah, I don't think we see Beatty ever again, and it would be wise for David Stearns if he finds the right deal, then yeah, you include Brett Beatty in that deal.
Yeah, he's so far down the depth chart that I mean, there's got to be a team that will take a flyer, and that's a guy that I think you got to move at the deadline here, one way or the other. Because you gotta get something for him while there's any sort of value left. Whether it's a reliever, whether it's a starting pitcher, whether it's Randy, whether it's any sort of bat, and it might look like a fleece job in a couple of years, but it goes back to the conversation I have where I just don't think it's gonna work out here with Beatty. Like, If he thrives elsewhere, good for him. But it's not going to work here because, like you said, you mentioned a laundry list of guys that are at this point higher on the depth chart than him. He's just not even in sight and in mind right now. But I do want to get to more comments here, which the press Mets fan, what's going on. Hopefully they get a revenge for Atlanta, which we'll talk about that series a bit. We have a Phillies fan here saying he wants us to sweep the Braves. I would freaking love that. I think that's the one thing Philly fans and Met fans agree on is we both hate the Braves with a passion. This comment I wanted to bring up, though, specifically. My counter to this is the Mets don't have an idiot general manager. They don't. If this was Billy Epler at the helm, if this was Zach Scott at the helm, I would agree. Who's ready to give up like multiple prospects for Michael Kopech, which I like Kopech, but still, you don't give up what he's saying.
Come on, pull up the picture. We know who we have leading us. Yep,
we have this beauty leading the charge right now. I trust him to the point where he's not going to budge. If Tampa Bay is being stubborn, then the Mets will just simply say, all right, we'll look somewhere else. So the Rays can be as stubborn as they want. I don't think Stearns is going to overpay for him. And if he does overpay, again, if it's Brett Beatty who goes in a deal and thrives elsewhere, good for Beatty. Good for him, and I'm happy for him. But it's just not going to be here. And, yeah, he traded Hader. But what did Josh Hader do when he was with San Diego? And he had the opportunity to trade a top-end reliever and get a haul back. I'm sorry, you do that. Like, that's why this is the David Stearns philosophy with relievers, and that's why you're not going to see the Mets overspend for a reliever this year. The philosophy for the Mets is simply we could find guys off the street for all we care to come in and get viable innings. We don't have to overspend on guys. That's why they didn't go and do what the Angels did. Because remember when every Met fan this offseason wanted Stevenson? What has that guy done with the Angels? I haven't heard his name. They gave him a 3-year, $11 million deal. What's that guy done? Josh Hader with the Astros, even the guy that you're saying has been Jekyll and Hyde with the Astros this year. It's not like he's been lights out like he once was, and I know his numbers have been better as of late, but again, Jekyll and Hyde.
And I mean, yeah, going back to that point they traded Hader. I mean, look, not every GM or president of baseball operations is perfect. Like, you're gonna make mistakes. It happens. Like, you're never gonna have a 100% hit rate on trades or signings. Like I said, they're human at the end of the day. They're gonna make mistakes, but most of the time or not. Like, David Stearns fleeces other teams in trades. And I mean, if you want a good video to back that up, shout out to our guy Jolly Olive on his YouTube channel. A couple months ago, he put out the modern trade history of the Milwaukee Brewers. Look how many trades David Stearns has fleeced other teams throughout the years that he was in Milwaukee. So,
the Mets gave up a haul for Keon Broxton.
Yeah, Keon Broxton
to the Brewers. Like,
I don't know if it was a haul, but
I mean, listen, I don't know what they got.
But they gave up human beings for Keon Broxton. I know that.
Yeah, that's my point though. Like, he had a guy like Keon Broxton, which, yeah, like you said, probably not a haul. I should probably ease up on using that word, but I'm actually going to look back on the trade, but I'm sure they got at least one.
I think they gave up Bobby Wall in that deal.
I know for sure Bobby Wall was in that deal, which, but I'm sure they had to have got somebody that gave them viable work. No, I'm actually surprised they didn't. All right, I take that back. But I mean, he still got human beings for Keon Broxton. Like,
the only viable thing that Keon Broxton did in his Mets tenure was that one game against the Nationals where he had the go-ahead RBI hit. That's all he did.
And good for you for remembering that, because I could tell you I had no memory of that outside of him attempting to bunt left and right and me wanting to throw my phone at the TV. Those are the only memories I have of Keon Broxton as a Met.
Yeah, that was the same game JD Davis hit two home runs off Patrick Corbin. And I know Cano went deep in that game, and Pete went deep in that game too.
God bless your soul for remembering that.
I think they won like 5-4 that game or something like that.
Because I literally have zero memory of Keon Broxton doing anything. But let's also keep in mind, too, with Bobby Wall, he actually had some value at the time. Like, I know he didn't become anything, but he had some value at the time. And you traded him and other human beings for a guy who was basically swinging a pool noodle up at the plate. The guy had a 517 OPS, and the Mets believe this is just old Mets philosophy where they thought that 2017 year where he had 20 home runs, a 719 OPS, which isn't even that high of an OPS, pretty much tells you he was either hitting a home run or striking out most of the time.
I wouldn't be surprised if Brody Van Wagner got confused and thought he was trading for Byron Buxton.
Probably. He probably thought he was. Given the fact that it's a guy that steals bases, and he probably saw the stolen bases and home runs, and he's like, oh, that's Byron Buxton. He must have just been hurt in 2018. But you gave up human beings for that. David Stearns was on the other end of that. So it's like, again, I trust... Like, if you're not going to trust David Stearns, I mean, who do you want in the front office then right now? Who do you want? Because I think that for right now, I mean, until he gives us a reason to not believe in him, he should have our faith right now. And that's also where, again, maybe that's what's going to happen this year, where he moves a guy that, like Jose Quintana, which for some reason wouldn't be popular with the fan base, even though I think, I mean, I'm ready personally to slingshot him off the White Stone.
Shout out to Carson.
Shout out to Carson. But, you move Katana and you get multiple arms back. We're going to look back at that and say, great work, David Stearns. Like,
that's why like when people were freaking out during the offseason, they were saying, oh, what's Stearns doing? He's getting all these no name guys. I'm like, guys, like, chill, relax. Like, he's got a proven track record. Like, yeah, sure, I understand it's not the big sexy names that we all wanted, but I mean, you also take a look at the outer context. Like the Mets this year are eating like $68 million of guys who are not on the roster just off of Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, and James McCann. Like, all that money is coming off the books next year. Like, because Verlander's hurt right now, so he's not going to hit his innings like option that it's going to trigger another year on his contract. So that $68 million is coming off the books. And if you think Steve Cohen is not going to use that money to go after guys like Corbin Burns or Juan Soto, then listen, David Stearns is not a small GM market. He's shown he can work in that environment, but give him the money, he will spend. I mean, look, they tried to go out and sign Yamamoto this year. They offered the same contract as the Dodgers. He chose to sign with the Dodgers, and look, good for him and good luck to him in LA. But Stearns and Cohen will spend next year. Like, I can promise you that.
Yeah, and I mean, as long as Cohen's at the helm, it's not going to matter. We saw him pay to get prospects last year. Like, you look at the Yankees, they wish they could be doing that with guys like Rizzo and Stanton.
And LeMahieu.
But Hal would quite literally never. So, we'll see what happens over the coming days. Like I said at the top of the show, with this being more consistent, I'd like to keep this more consistent, especially since the Mets are a quality team right now and are worth watching. And I'll read this last comment. And I don't think you're crazy. I think, like I said before, if they're going to spend the farm on a reliever, Mason Miller's the guy to do it. But I also just worry about doing that still. I also simply worry. But just because pitchers scare me more than paying prospects for hitters, especially relief pitchers with how up and down they tend to be. But like I mentioned, I'd like to make this more consistent. There will, of course, be plenty of Mets content over the coming days. we'll be back probably after the series against Atlanta, which then I will be going on vacation, so I will not be covering the Minnesota series. So this is my formal way of breaking the news to Matt live on the channel that he's going to have to cover that Minnesota series while I'm away. And it's the trade deadline, which kind of sucks that I'm not going to be able to host a deadline stream, but I can't really say it sucks because I'm going to be on vacation. So who would I be to complain? But I will try to get content to you guys either way throughout the deadline. And we'll, of course, have podcasts covering the deadline, reviewing it. That will probably be after the Twin series. So you'll probably get something related to the series after the Braves. You will get something after the Twins, which will be a bigger episode because we're going to, recap the deadline really in depth there since we're not going to have the chance to be live for it. And then we'll just continue doing that. I want to try and make this a thing where it is after series, which there is that weird makeup game with the Cardinals, so we'll have to figure out what to do about that. But again, remains to be seen. So we have a lot of content coming your way, and especially if this team makes the playoffs, then we are fully dialed in for October. But this weekend here could be the difference in this team playing October ball or not, because if they get pummeled by the Braves, because we're all walking in cocky and arrogant right now, and rightfully so, but if, and I hope not, but if for some unforeseen reason the Mets get pummeled this series, that changes the entire demeanor and conversation for July 30th, which is the trade deadline. So
do we want to do a little prediction for the series against the Braves?
If you want, you can. I'm not opening my mouth. I'm too worried to open my mouth.
All right, that's fair. All right. Well, I have my prediction, but I'll keep it to myself.
Yeah, I'm too superstitious and I hate it. I hate that I am, but it is what it is. But that's going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you did enjoy. Of course, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when we do this down the road. Maybe we'll start doing live post games as well. Who knows? But thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.